Burlesque by Kamari333. Chapter 23. The Park, Part 1. 2 weeks passed like a blur for Lust. He kept hoping Dance would try again to get to Red. He had been doing so well before Lust ruined the moment, and oh, how Lust kicked himself for it for the next week. But it never happened. If anything, it only made the tension and the silence between them even more intense. Lust had his theories that it had more to do with Red's feelings than Dance's, especially given the sheer volume of watermelon that Lust's smaller boyfriend consumed on a regular basis following the incident. The potential, left to stagnate in mutual pining, was driving Lust crazy. It wasn't all bad, though. Now that he and Red were roommates, oh my god, they were roommates! Lust got to wake up to this every morning. Red curled protectively around Lust's body, usually with one leg hooked over his own, like this morning. One arm had snaked under Lust's head and curled back to hang over him, leaving Red's claws to scratch absently at his neck and jaw. Red's other arm was curled around and pressed to Lust's back, kneading at his spine. Lust purred, snuggling deeper into those arms, closing his sockets again to try and eke out just a little more cuddle time before work tore him away. Only one thing would make a morning like this better. Lust sighed, kicking himself for being so selfish again. He couldn't force a relationship. It had to come naturally. Patience was a virtue. But stars, if the thought of having them both here right now didn't just make his soul flutter like nothing else. Lust was drawn from his musings by the loud, obnoxious sound of Red's cell phone going off. Red growled, muttering vulgarities Lust hadn't realized were actual words, as his one hand scrambled for the noisy phone on the shelf over the bed. It took longer than either Lust or Red would have liked for Red to get a hold of it and flip it open, cutting off the sound. "Someone better be fucking dying," Red growled into the phone, socket still closed. Lust couldn't hear the other end of the call, but whatever was said, or whoever had said it, was enough to make Red roll over onto his back, sitting up in bed and glaring at the opposite wall as if doing so would cause the other party on the line to spontaneously combust. Lust whined involuntarily at being so unfairly deprived of his bedmate, especially when he had been so comfortable. He retaliated by snuggling into Red's lap, nuzzling his hip and wrapping his arms around Red's spine and hips. Red stroked at Lust's skull apologetically, dragging his claws deliciously over his cranium in slow, even strokes, seemingly taking comfort from the action as the tension in his own body waned. "How the fuck's that my problem? Ain't my depart—" Red grumbled into the receiver, only to cut off as the other person spoke. "So what do you want me to do about it?" He listened to their answer. "When? How much?" "Figures. Fine, I'll be there. Fuck off." With that, Red snapped the phone shut, slamming it back onto the shelf and laying back down. Lust snuggled closer again, purring as Red settled in with his teeth flush with Lust's skull. Lust was certainly curious about the call, but considering how tense his date mate now was, he thought it best to tend to him first. Red had told Lust he would be out all day that Saturday. True to his word, Red had gotten up at the crack of dawn, rummaged for something Lust couldn't identify in one of his dimension boxes, and left before Lust was awake enough to give him a proper goodbye kiss. Although he felt it, how Red loomed over him, one claw alighting tenderly on his skull, before he leaned down and pressed his teeth to Lust's frontal bone, then his jaw, lingering there as he murmured, "Go back to sleep, sweetheart." And Lust did, clutching at the pillow and the sheets that still smelled like him. When Lust was finally awake enough to function, he found Red had been thoughtful enough to make him breakfast. 2 toasted bagels and a few celery sticks sat waiting for him next to a jar of homemade mayonnaise. Lust wondered where it came from. Had Red bought it from some artisan store? As he dug in, purring happily at the taste. Leaving the dishes in the sink, he waited for Dance to show up. Lust tried to kill time by laying on the couch watching TV, but there was a melancholic air in the room. Something was missing. His internal clock was screaming that it was Saturday, and Saturday was the day he had both of his boys. There was no ignoring the absence of his larger date mate. Lust kicked himself inwardly for his selfishness and greed. Dance didn't keep him waiting long. Lust immediately threw himself into Dance's arms, nuzzling and purring. "That bad, huh?" Dance murmured, curling his arms around him. "Want some help with that?" He put one hand on Lust's hip, kneading at it, an invitation. Lust shook his head. "It's not that, it's Saturday, and Red's supposed to be here. But he has something to do and won't be home till tonight." And it felt empty without him here. It felt empty without him here before, but now it was worse. Dance huffed, but from the way he looked around the room, Lust could tell he was feeling the difference, the absence, too. "Well, we don't gotta stay here neither." Lust looked up at him, not quite catching on. Dance smiled, equal parts shy and smug. "I mean, we haven't really been on a real, you know?" Lust raised a bone brow before his smile spread threefold, even as his soul hammered in his core with nervous delight. "You mean a date? Lust caught himself, feeling his cheek flush hot with embarrassment at the near fatal slip of the tongue. "I'd like that, very much." Dance blushed, immediately pulling his hood over his face to try and hide it. Lust snickered, kissing him, before darting off to change into clothes he could wear out and about comfortably. He went with a pair of black hip-hugger jeans, which he still needed a belt for, and his favorite human soul crop top. Setting his lazy day baggy clothes aside, clothes that wouldn't be comfortable without sitting in a freezer or snuggling under Red's arm, Lust shortcut back out to grip Dance's hand in his own, already excited to have a proper date with his date mate. "Where do you think we should go? The museum, Grillby's, a malt shop, share something girly and overly sweet?" The possibilities were endless, really. And if Lust were honest with himself, he wouldn't care what they did as long as they did it together. That excitement must have been contagious, because Dance gripped his hand back, then pulled him through a shortcut to a conveniently empty alleyway. "Let's just take it easy today? Lazy little day in the park? Catch some sun, feed the pigeons." He chuckled, and it was only because he'd heard it so many times before that Lust caught the nervousness bubble towards the tail end of it. "Is that too lame?" Lust snuggled closer, resting his head on Dance's shoulder. "That sounds perfect," he admitted, because it was true. Because it would be the two of them, together. And that's all Lust really wanted. Well, that and Red to make it 3, but that was just him being selfish. Lust pushed it from his mind, settling on being grateful for the collar around his neck, reminding him Red cared. He and Dance walked the last block to the park hand in hand, only to find it less than the peaceful retreat they were expecting to find, which was, again, perfectly fine by Lust, as long as they were finding it together. If anything, the excitement, the noise, the people, the energy of togetherness and camaraderie and, oh sweet starlight, there were children. Lust adored children. He tightened his grip on his boyfriend's hand, quickening his pace and moving forward towards the tents and booths that were swarming all up and down the park. He could feel the smile splitting his face eagerly as he took in the activities. It looked like a fair. Dance let Lust guide him into the throng of people. Lust noticed to his ever-growing delight that the population attending the event was equal part human and monster. And there were so many kids. It made something warm and paternal fill Lust up, made him want to hug them and knit them snug little sweaters, even though he was honestly awful at most crafts, and make them little sandwiches and tell them awful jokes to get them laughing. They were precious. Dance tensed as they mingled in the crowd, squeezing Lust's hand a little harder as the crowd became thicker. Lust looked him over from the corner of his sockets, checking for any sign of discomfort. Thankfully, Dance seemed perfectly at ease, the strength of his grip more likely a sign of wanting to stick close. He side-eyed Lust, smiling softly, before indicating with the bob of his skull to one side that he wanted to check something out. Lust followed his lead, pleased as punch to find his date mate showing interest in something. It ended up being a booth that was selling hot dogs. Lust cooed, looking up at the adorable kids, teenagers, really, but they were still kids to Lust, who were running it. 2 dogs, please, Dance ordered, already pulling out his wallet. Oh, make mine a foot long, Lust chimed in, seeing they were on the menu. Don't bite off more than you can chew, Dance warned playfully. I think I can muster up the nerve, Lust quipped back. I'll just have to catch up to you then, Dance snickered. Lust nuzzled his date mate, giggling at their shared humor. Dance was shaking with mirth right along with him, until suddenly he wasn't. Lust looked up, confused at the swift change in Dance's posture. His boyfriend's smile was straining, nearly imperceptible if you weren't familiar with him. He was so good at hiding his expressions. His eyelids just that tiny bit smaller than they should have been normally. Lust followed his gaze, looking up at the kids who were working the stall. It was Lust's turn to feel defensive. The teenagers were glaring daggers at the two of them. Their stances, their expressions, the carefree friendliness was gone, replaced with vicious loathing badly masked behind the sheerest curtain of false pleasantness, a last-ditch attempt at trying to be cordial as they continued with their business exchange. Lust clutched tighter to Dance's free hand. Dance suddenly shifted so he was between the stall and Lust, as if trying to be a shield between him and a perceived threat. Dance paid for the hot dogs with a chuckle and a thanks, his eyelids focused and sharp even as he tightened his grip on Lust's hand, so much so it encroached upon painful. The two of them walked away without another word. Lust could feel the kid staring holes into the back of his skull, a palpable intent to hurt clinging to him for minutes afterward, ruining his appetite. He was just thankful it hadn't soaked into the food in his hand. Thankful a few minutes of walking around would dispel it. The tension in Dance's graceful, fluid motions gradually eased the further away they got from that stressful encounter. Lust tugged him gently towards a park bench where they could settle down and relax with their snack. Lust knew he'd made the right call when he felt Dance lean heavily on him, soaking in his warmth like it was a rare commodity. Lust relaxed at the pleasant pressure on his side, slinging his arm around Dance's neck and pulling him closer, cradling his skull against Lust's shoulder, right up against the collar around his neck, which sparked protectively, soothingly, completing the trinity Lust so desperately needed for just that briefest moment in his soul. Everything was okay. Racists were just inevitable. No reason to let it ruin their day. Lust wouldn't let it. Not when there were so many good things about today. There were better reasons to ruin a good day than some stranger's dirty looks. Dance took a bite out of his hot dog. Then his smile curled more genuinely. Gotta admit, they make a mean dog. Lust laughed, kissing him, before devouring his own snack. The two of them sat there, just enjoying each other's company and the distant musical blaring of a marching band, until Lust's curiosity began to itch and he was ready to explore again. Dance, luckily, also seemed up for another try, their short cuddle session seemingly as rejuvenating for him as it had been for Lust, which Lust was grateful for. He wanted Dance to have fun, too. The two of them continued on their date, Dance's arm around Lust's waist now, his thumb hooked possessively over the flare of Lust's iliac crest. Lust smiled, slinging his arm over Dance's shoulder. The world just felt right like that. Like this. Yes, a piece was missing. Lust couldn't help reaching up to tug longingly at his collar to get those little sparks, reminders that even though Red wasn't there now, he was still there and would be coming home to him soon. But with Dance steadfast by his side, Lust couldn't be anything short of content. And they were on a date. Oh God, Lust was on an actual real-life date with his real-life date mate, and Dance was publicly showing affection and wasn't ashamed of him. The enormity of that dawned on Lust all at once, and he had to pull Dance aside, had to pull him close and wrap his arms around him and kiss him in the shadows of a colorful tent. Dance made a noise of surprise, then another noise that was hunger and satisfaction all at once, pulling Lust closer, making him feel wanted, needed. Lust broke the kiss with a nervous giggle. "Sorry, You don't need to be sorry for Dance stammered, flushed that pretty azure that Lust adored. "Yeah?" Lust asked, already knowing the answer, even if he still had a hard time believing it. "Yeah." They held each other like that, calming down from the spike of emotion. Lust purred, nuzzling his head against Dance's shoulder, listening to the crowd that was all around them, the shrieks of distant laughter and the rumble of happy voices, juxtaposed against the soft, steady, white noise of Dance's unnecessary breathing. He pushed down the heat that simmered in his marrow, unwilling to let it interrupt this innocent, untainted event, unwilling to end it so soon. It was Dance who eventually ended the moment, guiding Lust out again into the sun, the crowd, the celebration of community. He made a point of going to every booth, sharing the experience with Lust, treating him to little snacks, and playing the games with him. It would have been perfect, if not for the way all the kids were looking at them. Everywhere they went, teenagers, both human and monster, gave them dirty looks. The adults, the chaperones, the volunteers, those folks didn't give them a second glance. But the kids seemed to have collectively decided that there was something abhorrent about Lust and Dance. Lust let it slide right off of him, or he tried to. He couldn't help that twinge of hurt that twisted in the deepest part of him, that somehow he was so awful, so depraved, even children would denounce his existence now. But he could see it was starting to irritate his boyfriend. They both silently agreed to ignore it, exchanging a quick, chaste kiss as they meandered down the walkway, getting closer to the amphitheater, where the marching band had left and the orchestra had started playing in its place. The crowd was thicker the closer they got to the source of the music, but the adults thinned out, replaced more with the kids that seemed to be largely running and enjoying the event. More smiling faces turned to hateful glares as they walked. Scowls and murmurs of disdain echoed in the air. Beside him, Dance tensed even more, grinding his teeth. "Sweetie, maybe it would be a better idea to, go home to enjoy lunch?" Lust suggested sweetly. "No," Dance said, that note of finality echoing in his voice, resolute to see this through. Lust shook his head, nuzzling closer. He supposed if Dance was all right with it, he would be too. Not the first time he'd gotten this treatment, and surely not the last either. He just wished he knew the why of it. Dance clutched that little bit tighter to Lust's hip, pointedly keeping his eyelids straight ahead. This date hadn't gone the way he'd wanted it to at all. He'd been going for calm, quiet, relaxing, just him and Lust and nature. What he got was a huge production. He would have left immediately if Lust's face hadn't lit up like Giftmas had come early, and charged into the throng of people with renewed purpose, his melancholy forgotten. It wouldn't have been so bad if it weren't for all the dirty looks they were getting. The weird part was that it wasn't even racism. Dance could see it. The kids were happy to see them at first. The looks came after, like a switch had been flipped, like they had broken some unspoken rule and been painted as criminals or traitors to a club they didn't realize they had been a part of. The adults didn't give them the same treatment, seemingly used to seeing skeletons around. It was only the kids, the teenagers. Dance almost took Lust up on his offer to leave, but he couldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. He knew Lust was still having fun, was still enjoying himself despite everything. He would find a way to turn it all around, but in the meantime, They would find a quiet place to wind down and relax, enjoy nature. They were nearly there when Dance felt it. Something was flying at them. Dance grabbed Lust around the waist and dodged to one side. He heard a cracking noise, a splattering noise, not a moment later. When he looked, he saw it, an egg broken open on the tree right next to where they had just been standing, yolk sliding down the trunk to pool in the grass impotently. Before Dance could wrap his head around the fact that someone was trying to egg them, a second projectile flew through the air. Dance dodged this one as well, using the trajectory to try and find the assailant. He picked a pale human boy out of the crowd, hand already raised to toss the third egg from one of the 3 cartons under his arm. "Good idea, Kevin!" a voice called out, filled with righteous retribution and no small amount of sadistic glee. "Does he just carry a random egg carton everywhere?" one person asked. "I mean, probably," a second responded, shrugging. "It's Kevin." Like that explained everything. Kevin threw the next egg, and Dance jumped to the side, pulling Lust out of harm's way. "What's gotten into you, kiddo?" Dance asked, trying to stay calm. Lust's heat at his side was incredibly helpful in that regard. "Don't you know throwing eggs at people is a pretty foul thing to do?" Lust snorted, shaking with quiet laughter, leaning up to kiss his cheek, oozing relief. Dance smiled wryly. He hated that Lust's first thought must have been that he was going to have a breakdown over a few broken eggs. He hated that, just like he hated that it wasn't out of the realm of possibility. He could already feel that rush of electricity, of impotent but demanding energy making his legs feel both weak and strong all at once, demanding fight or flight. Dance pushed down the feeling hammering in his ribcage, in his rebellious soul, pushing down and ignoring the fact that there was an angry teenage boy throwing things at him and his boyfriend. He did it by focusing on Lust, on how warm and comforting he was, on how he was laughing, having fun despite everything about this date having gone to hell. Kevin threw the rest of his first egg carton at them, not landing a single hit because, "Do you expect us to just stand there and take it?" "Yes!" Kevin snapped in ever-increasing frustration. "Take it like a man!" "But don't you prefer to give it, baby?" Lust whispered in Dance's ear. And oh, Dance couldn't decide if he wanted to pin Lust to a wall and prove him right, or double over laughing, or curl up into a blushing ball of nerves. But he was grinning now. He was calm, and he couldn't for the life of him figure out why he was calm when this should have had him a nervous wreck. Maybe it was because he knew Lust could take care of himself, maybe better than Dance could. Maybe it was because these were fucking eggs, and not the little white bullets they so very much looked like. Maybe it was because he refused to let anything else ruin their date today. But then Dance looked out into the crowd and felt a shiver run down his spine. There was genuine hate in those eyes, in the eyes of humans and monsters alike who had gathered to watch. "What is it you think we did, huh?" Dance asked, trying to figure out what it was that was driving these kids to attack them. Kevin didn't answer, just continued to throw eggs until he ran out. Then he darted off, clearly still utterly enraged over something. Dance and Lust looked at each other, and Dance could tell that Lust was just as confused as he was. "Aw, man," one of the kids in the crowd complained. "Not fair." The crowd that had built up dispersed now that the show was over, leaving Dance and Lust with more questions than answers. A knowing laugh came from one of the adults nearby.
"Oh dear, you must have offended the science teacher."
Lust looked over. "What?" The human came over, all patient smiles and mirthful eyes.
"Kevin only ever gets the eggs out if you insult the science professor. For all he acts like he doesn't care, he cares a lot. He's a good kid, deep down."
She looked off after where Kevin had run, sighing.
"It would explain why the other children seem to have it out for you." I was in your shoes last semester after I accidentally bumped into him and spilled his lunch on the floor. The kids kept stealing all my chalk for a month.
Dance huffed. We haven't even met any teachers. How could we have upset one enough to get an army of kiddos sicked on us? That didn't even make any sense. Dance could count on one hand how many people he'd interacted with in the last few months, and none of them were in the education business except his brother. Lust giggled. I don't know, but you have to admit, it's adorable they love him so much. The human shrugged.
I think so too, especially given his prickly disposition. Not that he isn't pleasant. He's intelligent and meticulous, and he has such a way with the kids, it's really a sight to behold.
She covered her mouth, realization dawning on her.
Oh, listen to me gushing about him when I should be asking if you two are all right.
We're fine, just confused and maybe a little amused. Lust dismissed her concern with an elegant wave of his hand, smiling brightly.
I apologize for Kevin's behavior.
The human assured them.
I'll make sure someone has a talk with him. I'll let Mr. Seraph know right away before I forget.
The idea of talking with this other person, this Mr. Seraph, seemed to be a source of excitement, like the human had been waiting for any excuse to strike up a conversation. She started power walking towards the amphitheater. Dance buried his face into Lust's shoulder, needed a moment, just a moment, to decompress. He wasn't particularly fond of strangers, or having eggs thrown at him, or humans in general, and he just needed a minute to gather himself. He'd wanted a nice, relaxing day lazing about in the shade of a stupid tree with his boyfriend to take their mind off his stupid fucking crush. That's all he had wanted. But no, that would have been too easy. The whole day had to be filled with loud, chaotic people giving them dirty looks and then have some psycho kid throw a dozen eggs at them. Lust rubbed at Dance's back, kissing the side of his skull. Dance took a deep breath. That sense of calm still lingered on the fringes of his mind. And that, coupled with Lust's warmth, his scent, was enough to ground him again. You sure you don't want to head home, baby? Lust asked in that soft, soothing voice, sweet and sincere and understanding. Dance hugged him tighter, seriously considering it this time. Going home meant heading back to Lust's place, where they could curl up and snack on pizza and watch movies and forget all about children and eggs and... Wait, did she say Mr. Seraph? Dance asked out loud, knowing the answer already. I think so? Why? Name ring a bell? Lust probed. No way. Dance pulled away from Lust, gripping his hand and spinning to march with purpose the same direction the human had gone. He had to be wrong. There was no way. But Dance had seen it on paper too many times over the last few years to be mistaken. He knew that name. That was Red's last name. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, hit the like button to let me know and subscribe to see what I make next. Links in the description lead to the original fic posted on AO3, as well as my Patreon and Ko-fi. If you like my stuff, please consider supporting me. Every little bit helps. Lastly, if you have a request for a recording, whether a one-shot or a series, let me know in the comments. I also do commissions, details of which are on my Patreon. So keep in touch. Bye!